Gospel of Luke, the 19th chapter, first to the 10th verses, where you hear these words. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through town. A man there named Zacchaeus, a ruler among tax collectors, was rich. He was a ruler among tax collectors and he was trying to see who Jesus was. But being a short man, he couldn't because of the crowd, so he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree so he could see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to that spot, he looked way up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down at once, for I must stay at your home today." So Zacchaeus came down at once, happy to welcome Jesus. Everyone who saw this grumbled, saying, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone, I repay them 4 times as much." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this household, because he too is the son of Abraham. The human one came to seek and to save the lost." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
I think I was the most miserable man in all of Israel. Probably the most miserable person. And I heard it often enough. I wasn't the only one who thought so. And when I would be out doing my job, collecting the taxes, if I heard it once, I heard it 1,000 times. And people would say, "That's Zacchaeus. He's such a miserable little shrimp. He sides with the Romans on everything. He takes all of our stuff, all of our money. The world would be a better place if he just dropped dead." I probably heard it 4, 5, 6 times a day, or more. Rare was the day that I didn't hear it that many times, and there was never a day that I didn't hear it at least one time, unless if I stayed home. Yeah. It was awful. But I also realized that at least in part it was my undoing. And when I decided to become a tax collector, I never realized that it would be that I wouldn't have any friends. But think about it. Would you be friends with somebody that worked for the Internal Revenue Service? Most of us wouldn't. But I'll tell you that it was even worse back in those days, because I know. You think that the government robs you every year in April. But it was worse then, because at least those people that work for your IRS, they get paid by the government that employs them. See, when I became a tax collector and I went to work for the Romans, they promised me great wealth. They didn't promise me how I was going to get it. And the thing was, I got in and started doing the job, and I found out that I didn't have a paycheck, as you would call it. I didn't have payday coming. The government didn't pay me anything. I was to draw my pay directly from the people that I'm collecting taxes from. The government would tell me how much that I had to collect from Jerry out there. But then I could collect however much I could get out of Jerry out there. I could threaten him with soldiers, jail, all kinds of things to try to get more money from him. And whatever I collected that was beyond what the government said Jerry had to pay, that was my salary. I was good at my job. I was really good at my job. And I became pretty well off because of it. It wasn't long before I had surpassed all the other tax collectors in Jericho and became the chief tax collector. But that presented yet another problem, because I did have a couple of friends when I was just a tax collector. But when I became the chief tax collector, all those friends disappeared, because who wants to hang out with their boss? Now, when I first started, it was really kind of cool, because it wasn't the collecting part, everybody being upset and calling me names and all that stuff. That part wasn't cool. But for the first time in my life, I actually had money. I could do whatever I wanted to do, whenever I wanted to do it. And that part was exciting. Until I looked around one day and said, yeah, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, but I don't have anybody to do it with. Because nobody wants to hang around with Zacchaeus. I thought, I'll give it. We're going to go out and have a good time. I told somebody that I thought at least once a good friend, and I said, I'll take you with me and I'll pay you away. I'll pay for everything. He turned around without a word and walked away. Didn't say anything. Just walked away. And such is life for a tax collector. Because nobody really wanted anything to do with me. I'd invite people to my house. Nobody came. I'd try to get people to go out. Nobody goes. So I sat at home. And I started sitting at home, and I had all this money and nobody around. And all I could do really, because it got harder and harder to go out in public, and all I could do was sit at home in my off time and count my money. So I decided I could use some help around the house. You know, somebody to clean the house, somebody to do my laundry, somebody to cook my meals. I didn't want to ever have to eat my own cooking. Well, I don't think that I so much needed them to come and help me as much as I just wanted to have people around. But even with them, they came in, they did their work, they wanted their pay, and they wanted away from the sinner as fast as possible. And so they would leave. And I was back by myself. One day I was out doing my collections, and I started hearing talk of this man from Nazareth, a man named Jesus. And that he was coming to Jericho soon. And I tried to get involved with the conversations, but as soon as I walked up to a group of people that were talking about it and started asking questions, yeah, they split up and go different directions, and yeah, I wasn't getting anywhere. So I decided that I just kind of stand, I go as close as I could to hear, but far enough away that they wouldn't run off. And I listened. And I gathered information about this Jesus that was coming, this Jesus that was going to be there in Jericho. And they said that he was going to come in and he would teach, and that he would heal people, and that we might even see some miracles. And then I heard that he really likes people that a lot of other people find are hard. Yeah, I heard he had disciples. I know that it depended on who I was listening to on how many disciples there were. Some said there were a few. Some said as little as few as 3. Some said there were 12. And then others said there were many disciples. But I thought I would see what these folks were all about. And I even heard that one of those disciples was a tax collector. And so, having all the information and knew when he was coming and that day got here, I went out into the city and I started trying to make my way to the city gate where I knew he would be coming in. And oh, the streets crowded. It was like everybody wanted to go and see Jesus. There were people everywhere. And I was getting pushed around. I got pushed around a lot anyway. Being a little guy, I got pushed around, but that day it was worse. And I've never seen so many people in Jericho at one time. And the people kept coming. And I kept trying to get to the city gate, but I finally reached the point I could go no further. And when I could go no further, that's when the guards started coming through. The guards started trying to push us because people were trying to get to the central part of the city. People were trying to get to a place where they could go to the night. And there were a lot of people on horseback and in carts and wagons and on foot, all trying to get to central Jericho. Not getting anywhere very fast. So the guards were pushing us all back. Well, when they started pushing us back, I wasn't in the middle of the street, so that when we got pushed over to the side, I was further back. And so now I'm standing trying to look at the street to see where Jesus is going to come. And I have this dream that I'm going to not just see Jesus, but I'm going to get to talk to him. And I can't see the street at all. It's just these people in front of me. I know I'm a shorter guy, and my 2 now grown sons, they weren't even born yet, I wasn't even married yet, but now they're grown, they're both taller than I am. So is almost every man in my family and in my wife's family. They're all taller than me. But even though they were all taller, I swear these people had to be part Philistine. And they were direct descendants of the giant Goliath. Remember, he was 9 feet tall. And then I thought, I know what I'll do. I've got money. I'll buy my way to it. And so I said to myself, cost will not be an object. I'm going to see Jesus today. Yeah, cost was an object. Because they weren't giving me their spot at any cost. At any price. And so my money, I might as well not have it. And I kind of walked just a short distance and I leaned up against a tree. And I started thinking, and I was so disappointed because I really had wanted to see Jesus. And I turned and I curled my hand into a fist and I just kind of started hitting lightly on the trunk of the tree. And I didn't hit hard, I hit the sick of the tree. The tree's hard. I'm not an idiot. I might have been frustrated, but I know better than to hit hard. And so, as I was all of a sudden an idea comes in my head. And I step back and I look at the tree and I think, there's several really strong branches. It looks like a really good tree. I hadn't climbed a tree in years. Not since I was a little boy. But if I wanted to see Jesus, I had to think of something, and this seemed like the best option. One of those limbs, though, I mean, it went right out over the edge of the road. And I could get out there, and I knew that when Jesus passed by, I'd have a bird's eye view, and I could see him as he walked by. Climbing that tree was a good deal harder than I remembered it being when I was a child. But still, I got up there, and I made my way out as far as I could on that limb. And I sat down and just waited. And it wasn't very long before I heard kind of a ruckus at the city gate. And I shifted my view so that I could look out that way. I couldn't really see it, but I knew this had to be Jesus. And as he was coming my way, there was a huge crowd of people around him. But when they got close, it wasn't hard to pick Jesus out. He looked happy. He looked like somebody with a lot of joy. And around him were just lots of people. You know, those people who said, I told you said that there were lots of followers? Well, they were right. There were lots of followers, but nobody was really wrong. Because within that huge group of people around Jesus, I counted them, there were 12. There were 12 who looked like they were just closer to Jesus, that they knew him better, that he trusted them more. And in that 12, I saw a familiar face. I didn't know Matthew well, but I knew who he was because we had both been tax collectors for the Roman government. And that just kind of made me smile a little bit. Matthew had been a tax collector and be a disciple of Jesus, and maybe I could too. And then I kept watching, and there were three. Matthew wasn't one of the three, but there were three that just really looked like they had this super close relationship with Jesus, and I found myself in envy. And just about that time, everything came to a stop. Jesus stopped right in the middle of the street. And when I started to look at him, I could see he was looking up and down my tree. He was looking all over the limbs of my tree. And then he was looking at me. And we made eye contact. And Jesus said, Zacchaeus, you need to come down out of the tree. You may not know it, but I'm on my way to your house. We're going to have a talk. I know that the story sounds weird. I mean, how did Jesus know my name? I guess somebody could have told him, but how did he know? How did he know the guy sitting in the tree was Zacchaeus? I hadn't talked to anybody about climbing. But you know the funniest part of it all to me was he invited himself to my house. Don't think anything about that. I didn't care. I wanted to talk to Jesus, and now I knew I was going to have my chance. I stood up. I almost fell out of the tree, standing up on my limb, getting ready to make my way back in. Jesus said, you need to be careful up there. I'm hungry, and I'm eating at your house tonight. I got down out of the tree, and we started to head towards my house. We hadn't walked 3 feet. And you know, all of the naysayers, the ones that are always all the time about everything. Look at Jesus. There he goes again. He's going to go to the house of a sinner, of a tax collector, a filthy, rotten tax collector. I mean, they were saying all kinds of things. And quite frankly, I was ecstatic at this point, and I was not in the mood. And so I stopped and I said, Jesus, I'm a very wealthy man. And I've taken my money and I've put it to work in different ways in what you would call investing. I went from just being well off as a tax collector to I'm rich. And half of whatever I have I'm giving to the poor right now. And if I cheated anybody, I'll pay them back 4 times the amount I cheated. I don't know where all that came from, because when I climbed that tree that day, the most important thing to me still wasn't talking to Jesus. It was really my money. But now, I knew that I was committed. Because I might have been a sinner and I might have been a filthy tax collector, but I was not going to lie to Jesus. I said it the way I was doing. We went on to my house, and when I got there, I had the employees kill the fatted calf, told Jesus that we're going to have what y'all might call a good old fashioned Texas barbecue. There was so much food and so much talk. And Jesus said, salvation has come to this house. For you, Zacchaeus, are truly a son of God. I came to seek and to save. We talked most of the night. And the next morning, Jesus and his disciples got up and they made their way back out of town. And honestly, I never saw them. But I started to see things differently. And after they had left, I got some of my money and I went out. And I went out to try to make the world a better place, or at least my little part. And I started doing things like I bought homes, and I repaired homes, and I fed people. I kept my position as a tax collector, mostly so that people would talk to me, because they still didn't trust me. And I don't blame them. But every day, try to do something to help somebody. And when I went out and I collected taxes, I collected exactly what Jerry owed to the government. No more, no less. And sometimes, when some of those folks that I knew were extremely poor, I just paid their taxes. And one day I was at Sapphira's home. Sapphira had lost her husband and had 3 children that she was trying to raise. And every time I had come before, I had no compassion. I would take everything she had. Coming down the road, she ran out of her house and ran toward me and said, "There is nothing here. I have nothing I can give you. I don't even have money to buy food for the children." We talked for a few minutes. And I said, "I'll take care of your taxes. And there'll be something a little later." And when I left, I went back into the central part of the city, back to the marketplace, and I bought food and had it sent to Sapphira's home. She later told me that it was the best her family had ever done. And she didn't really trust me for a while either. But I was in love. I was in love for the first time in my life, well, except for loving myself and my money. But slowly but surely, Sapphira accepted me. And we ended up getting married, and I raised her 3 children as my own, and we had 2 more of our own together. You know that when Jesus left, I developed a habit. I would get up early in the morning and go out on an errand. I would go out to pick up a bucket and then head to the well in the central part of the city. And I'd fill my bucket with water, and then I'd head to a tree. One day, after we were married, Sapphira was just curious of what I was doing every morning. And so she got up and she followed me. And I stood there at the tree and kind of rubbed on the bark a little bit. And I bent over and I pulled some weeds and picked up some trash at the base of the tree. And then I took my bucket and poured the water around the tree. And Sapphira then came out and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "This is where I'm at. This is where my life changed. And now for me, this tree is a lot like a place of worship. Not that I'm worshiping the tree, but I come here. And I remember what I used to do and the life that He's given me now." Well, after Jesus' death and resurrection, I gave up being a tax collector. Most of the people now had at least some trust in me, and so I went about doing the things I had been doing. But I also started building a relationship with the disciples, the 12 disciples, particularly the newest disciple, Matthias, who had replaced Judas. And Matthias and I got to be very close. And I worked a lot with him, and because of that work that I did, one day I was asked to be the first bishop of such a thing. And Matthias came up to me and he said, Jesus had 2 encounters with rich men. The first was a rich young man who went away sad because he had so many possessions. And he went away without salvation because he couldn't give up his stuff in order to be a disciple of Jesus. The other one was you. And Jesus said to you that salvation had come to your house. And it came because He gave so much of it. He said that if you live out Jesus' words, unless you're a pure heart, will red just as well. And I have seen God. I've seen God from sitting up in a tree. I've seen God in the poor folks that I've gone out to serve. I've seen God in my beautiful Sapphira. I've seen God in the faces of my children. I've seen God in all kinds of people who are out there doing righteous work. And as I look out this morning, I see God in your faces. And I will challenge you today. Search your heart. Are you pure in heart? Because it's important that you be pure in heart.